Serious? What's the strongest opinion you've ever held that you changed your position on? What happened? I used to really believe that it's not worth doing something if you can't do it right. After all, no one wants someone who's not committed if there's someone out there who's more committed. Kept this mentality through college and it cost me almost all my grades. I go to a really competitive school and the amount of work is such that it's absolutely unrealistic to expect to put my best foot forward all the time. I didn't understand that, and as a result I would literally just not turn in assignments. I ended up failing 3 classes in one semester because I couldn't turn in any essays, problem sets, or fully prepare readings for class. I got depression and couldn't summon the energy to shower, brush my teeth, or eat breakfast, so I just didn't. Taking a semester off made me realize that most of the things in life need to be done, more than they need to be done well. For example, I think most of us can understand that it's better to brush your teeth once a day, with no toothpaste, for 30 seconds, than it is to not do it at all. Similarly, it was a slap in the face when my English professor came up to me after I failed the semester and said, "You need to learn to be comfortable giving me crappy essays because a 40% is better than a 0%. I've found it applies to more of life than just college. Closed mouths don't get fed. If it's worth doing, it's worth doing crappy." I used to be completely opposed to the idea of spandex being in jeans. Denim should be rough and strong, not stretchy. You need to break it in. I went for years stuck in my ways even as my family tried to convince me. Then one day I was shopping by myself and tried on a pair of stretchy jeans. They changed my life. I bought multiple pairs and wear them daily. They still don't hold up as well as strong denim, but oh my god, does the comfort make up for it. Don't be like I was. Try stretchy jeans before it's too late. This was me until 4 years ago. First pair of skinny stretchy jeans my wife bought me changed my life. Used to be about frivolous lawsuits and say things like buttholes can sue McDonald's when their coffee's too hot, but came to learn the truth of that suit, documentary Hot Coffee, and realized the courts are one of the last places where the average person stands any chance against the wealthy powerful corporations. I dated a lawyer who gave me the actual facts about the McDonald's coffee incident. Truly opened my eyes. I thought people who didn't want to go to college or people who didn't even try to pursue a higher education were making a mistake. Now with the cost of college, student loans, and meeting people who were successful without college, I totally get it. Honestly, all college does for you is help get the foot in the door. It's not a promise of success. It's not an automatic good job. It just gets you the chance to argue for the position. I was briefly on the anti-vax train with it causing autism and crap, then seen a point about how we just got better at diagnosing it and was like, that makes sense, and that was that. This applies to so many diseases too, most notably, at least around me, cancer. My family says cancer is caused by almost anything because 100 years ago PPL didn't get it. Yay, 100 years ago they barely knew what cancer was, if at all, and life expectancy was shorter. This is rather specific, but I was convinced that the only way I, and pretty much anyone else, could lose weight was by following a very low carb diet, or at least a diet free of any grains. I have childhood memories of my parents doing Atkins and the article "What if it's all been a big fat lie?" And then I got exposed to keto and paleo online, on it, nerd fitness, etc. I lost weight going low carb. I know that plenty of people have successfully managed their weight via low carb, keto, paleo, etc. I tried going paleo, forgot that vitamin K counteracts a blood thinner I'm on, ate a bunch of asparagus, and promptly had a stroke. I ended up in the normal BMI category for the first time since elementary school by simply eating fewer calories than I was expending. Pasta and popcorn were key factors in my doing so. Yeah, I used to think the same thing. Always thought that dieting was something only healthy and well-off people could do and that it required a lot of time to accomplish. Started counting calories and doing 15 minutes of exercise a day minus weekends, and now I've lost 30 pounds over the past 5 months. I used to think people who committed suicide were cowards and selfish for inflicting suffering on their loved ones. Then I began to suffer from depression and attempted to commit suicide. I have a daughter who has made multiple attempts. It makes me rage when some assert that she is merely sad, should just get over it, etc. I'm glad you made it through. I used to want kids. I really wanted to have kids. My whole life I wanted to be a mom, dreamed of what my children would be like. I was always fairly practical about when I wanted to have them, though, and was pretty careful not to get pregnant. After being married for 5 years, my husband and I decided to go for it. We tried for a little over 2 years, unsuccessfully. It sucked. One day I got my period and was relieved that I wasn't pregnant. I realized that I didn't want that anymore. Talked to my husband. He felt the same. I got back on birth control. That was a couple years ago, and now we are discussing sterilization for both of us. I used to be anti-union because I saw too many lazy workers being protected. After a few years, I saw too many great workers left unprotected. I realized that unions help protect the balance. I grew up in a religious cult believing that I liked other guys because of imperfection and sin, and wholeheartedly devoted my life to suppressing that illness. I ended up in the hospital on an attempted suicide by overdose. During my mandatory psychiatric stay, a psychiatrist gave me quite a figurative slap in the face. Unlike therapists up until that point, he had absolutely no respect for the idea that I could suppress being gay. He was openly against it to the point of being rude. Would straight up laugh in my face when I said with all determination that I could lead a celibate life. I didn't appreciate it at the time, but his words stuck with me and made me rethink my priorities. Long story short, I'm now out of the cult and have zero contact with any of my old friends or family. It still hurts a lot, but I can say with confidence now that I made the right choice. When I was younger I hated the US with a passion for many reasons. Now, after meeting some average US citizens I realized although the place and its people aren't perfect, no one nowhere is. I no longer hate the US. My hate was always unwarranted and petty. I used to think it was bad for kids to be raised by a gay couple. I wasn't militantly against it, but I disagreed with it, thinking the kids would be mercilessly teased. Then in college, while writing for the school newspaper, I was sent to cover a lecture given by 2 guys who adopted drug-addicted babies and gave them a home. They even nursed an HIV-positive baby to being HIV negative. Opinion changed almost immediately. I read somewhere that gay couples tend to adopt the unadoptable children more often, as in they'll adopt older children, or those with disabilities. Being part of a minority really can make you more capable of compassion and empathy. I was a very patriotic teenager and I joined the US military. I'm now the mod of I regret joining and I live in Canada. Universal healthcare. I used to be against it. I now support it. I did a college project showing the case against universal healthcare. I had fantastic insurance through my dad's employer at the time. Fast forward, 26th birthday, lost my dad's insurance. Had a crappy retail job and couldn't afford insurance. Wasn't able to find work in my field. Was also in my state's gap for coverage. I was scared to death about getting sick. Even the simplest problem like needing antibiotics scared me so much. There was no way I could afford a hospital bill. Eventually I clawed my way up and landed a job with good pay and great health insurance. Regardless, those few years where I was uninsured scared me so much. I worry about those who don't have adequate coverage and aren't fortunate enough to move up in the workplace. It's a nerve-wracking place to be. Everyone should be taken care of, period. Nobody should have to make a choice between keeping a roof over their head or having health insurance. I'm Australian, and I can't imagine living with that mentality. The Australian healthcare system has its flaws, but if I suddenly need healthcare I know I can get it, largely for nothing. It just doesn't factor into our thinking in the same way as I hear people in the US describe. If I had to go to the emergency room, costs wouldn't enter my mind for a second. Honestly, though I never expressed them externally, I had some racist and superiority complex thoughts and had some aversion to people due to these thoughts. I slowly learned as I got older that these thoughts had no basis and were completely wrong, and found myself quickly having friends who more likely than not were completely different from me. I used to think that people who claimed to have an anxiety disorder were mostly exaggerating and crying for attention. Then I moved away for an internship one summer and got to walk a mile in their shoes. I knew no one where I was living and ended up isolating myself. Symptoms crept in one at a time, and while I never reached a point where I felt it absolutely necessary to seek professional help, I did get pretty close. Going from feeling generally comfortable in my own skin to constantly worrying about what you've screwed up and what you're going to screw up next is a terrible feeling. Not being able to sleep a wink despite being exhausted for nights on end is something I don't ever want to experience again either. It made my performance at that job horrendous. Luckily I spent enough time on the internet to stumble across really inspiring people and sources that helped me fix my situation. Others aren't quite so lucky and have to work 10x as hard to battle through it. I used to think that death penalty was a good idea. I thought about the people who've been killed who were later proven innocent. I don't think we as people, no matter what happened, should have the right to take someone's life. As a teenager I used to debate people online about why gay marriage is wrong. Then I went to a Christian college, studied my faith and Hebrew, and realized the Bible doesn't even say that. Yay for my hippie Christian school. Now I'm still a Christian, but one that's a LGBT ally and who tries to convince others they're wrong about what the Bible says about gay people and others. Also realized my faith alone shouldn't dictate law anyway. Would you mind sharing the parts of the Bible where it doesn't say that? I'm not challenging you on this, I just want to learn. I'm having a big issue with my faith because people want to say how bad that is but not love. As some people have pointed out, it is impossible to point out where it doesn't say that. I should have said where the context is misapplied to things today. After reading Pink as the Blank Slate, I completely changed my mind on nature versus nurture and became a better father for it. I broke up with girlfriends over wanting kids in life. Took me 30 years and meeting my wife to come upon adoption over natural. I used to be vehemently anti-tipping. Like many Redditors, I had my laundry list of reasons tipping sucks ready and waiting. Then I actually learned about the economics and what would happen if we stopped the tipping system. Most of my reasons for disliking tipping are still valid. They're just not remotely worth freaking over a huge segment of American workers, as well as other negative consequences. I used to be solidly in favor of routine infant circumcision. I believe it was cleaner and healthier and that it protected the boy from a lot of problems. Now I have learned better and I'm very solidly in favor of everyone having body integrity and all kids being protected from genital mutilation. I used to be quite opinionated about a lot of things when I was a teenager, probably the symptom of a difficult and unloving home life. I must have been a nightmare to be around as I was always so defensive and so self-righteous with my opinions. I fully supported causes like gay marriage and abortion in time where not many of my peers did and would have been very passionate about advocating for these causes, to the point where it lost me friends. As I've grown up I've mellowed out completely, and while I still have strong opinions and principles, I no longer feel obliged to announce it or virtue signal, I suppose. The point in trying to make here is that having really strongly held opinions can be exhausting. My position now is live and let live. If someone has a different opinion, that's okay. Let's have a discussion about it and not a debate. A discussion allows for us both to express ideas and understand each other's opinion. Hopefully we both come away with a new perspective from it. A debate is about winning and trying to show up the other person. I wish I realized this much sooner. I used to be super anti-abortion cause I grew up with horror stories of it being a situation where the babies were ripped apart and pulled out. I got more educated and then had a friend go through one, and now I'm pro-choice. I still don't like the idea of abortions. It's way better to prevent pregnancies, but I support them being legal and the woman being able to choose. Growing up in a religious Jewish household, Israel was meaningful and important to a lot of my family members, some of whom were Holocaust survivors. Try, for a moment, by the way, to put yourself in the headspace of a Holocaust survivor on this. You've been through heck and back and lost most, if not all, of your friends and family on the other side. Your entire life has been defined and dominated by antisemitism and being an outsider. And then you find out Jews are getting their own motherfucking country. Hot dang. Sounds pretty freaking sweet. So, I get the appeal. So there was a lot of subtle pressure in my life to see the actions of Israel's government in a positive light, pretty much no matter what, and most of my Jewish peers went on birthright trips to Israel and came back really adamantly Zionist. It was a little spooky even. And I really just wanted to believe that, and wanting to believe it for a long time functioned as believing it until it just didn't anymore, and now I'm just a self-aware critic of Israel. I don't think Israel can be made to not exist as a country, but I think there needs to be a radical reformation within its government and culture that moves it away from being a flagrant ethnostate. I used to think poor people were just lazy, but then I learned more about history and racism and economics. Now I basically think rich people are the problem. Like, I can understand keeping enough money to be situated well enough for the rest of your life, but once it gets to the point where you're just hoarding it or spending on frivolous stuff, then you gotta start investing in your community and doing charity work with the money. I've had incredible strong opinions against surveillance, while I'm still against mass surveillance. Compared to before, even the slightest camera could upset me. Not only is it easier to accept now, but as I recently was called as a witness, I started thinking in the terms that we might still to this day be based on witch hunts to some degree when we don't have other proof than words. Cameras can prevent that. Sure, have I understood that the use of cameras before, but never did I thought about what it actually could replace. I'm all for police officers being required to wear cameras. Freaking have cameras in all directions of their patrol cars. They're so important and extremely valuable to have as evidence of what actually happened. The fact that I was straight, really tough for me to realize I like girls too. I struggled with it mostly because in middle school I'd been taught gay was a bad thing and didn't even have a word for bi. Kinda difficult for me to see it as anything else even after I realized. Being a Democrat, I slowly began to realize the whole bipartisan system is rigged to pit people against each and keep everyone fighting and distracted. No wonder George Washington advises against it. I'm Christian, and as a kid I would be upset with my friends who stopped believing, etc., let alone point out the destructive past, present and unfortunately, probably future of the Christian church. I've changed my opinion mostly through seeing the effect it's had on people I know, especially LGBT friends. Lesbian identities. Was really nitpicky at what lesbians can and can't do until I realized I was a lesbian and it didn't feel great restricting my own identity. I was raised in a house that was religious, but fueled by my mother's mental illness. This meant that she would make up things of her own and claim that was how God wanted it. I grew up being told that black people and Asians were possessed by demons, and God could hear my every thought, so I had to constantly ask for forgiveness for small things like not liking someone's haircut. As a teen I made friends with a group of Asian girls, and realized quickly that they were wonderful people and not at all possessed by demons. It took a long time to understand that Christianity is not what my mother said it was. I still believe in God, but I know that he doesn't give nearly as many shoots as what my mother claimed, and no longer refer to myself as a Christian. TLDR. I used to believe in my mother's mentally ill form of Christianity until I made friends with some Asian girls. When I grew up, I was a firm believer of that everyone deserved to be happy and feel safe, so throughout the years I stood up and helped those I could. While I stood up, I also stood out. Other kids began to bully me. Teachers were just crap people and even joined in, losing friends to all the thinkable reasons. After a while I just had enough and snapped. I was more interested in seeing people just have a bad time. Bonus if I knew they were crap people. Some of the better things I knew after that was plotting out revenge on people I just didn't like. However, I'm in a better place now and I find myself just helping people out again. This time, I actually see some kindness in return. So I would say I am starting to go back, slowly. So many things. Off the top of my head, evolution and GMOs were two big things. I was raised a Jehovah's Witness, so thought the world was 6,000 years old. Didn't believe in evolution. Used to get into arguments with the doctors at work. I worked in a hospital. Realized before university how much sense it makes when I started reading Richard Dawkins' books. Now I have a degree in molecular biology, so I finally understand evolution a lot better. I used to think GMOs were evil and was vehemently opposed to them. But then I realized that I was just perpetuating misinformation without any reason for believing what I believed. When I finally asked myself why I believed GMOs were bad, I realized I didn't even know what GMO stood for. Quickly realized while reading up on them how amazing they are. Years later, while getting my degree, I also took a genetic engineering course. Fun stuff. I used to be very in favor of the death penalty. Now I am 100% against it. I realize that the courts are crap and innocent people are convicted. If people are innocent, I want them to have hope that they will be vindicated and released. The people that are guilty should suffer in prison for the rest of their lives. A quick death is too good for them. I used to be all for it too, until I once heard someone say, for it to work, you have to be 100% right. 100% of the time. It really changed my perspective. Also, the justice system is super fricked. Communism. I am a big believer in that everyone will do what is best for everyone. I quickly learned that some people are dongs and only care for themselves. I still think it could work in a small group, but ultimately some people aren't cut out for the idea of it. Abortion. I was passionately pro-life for a long time. I'm a libertarian, but I considered infants as humans whose rights I believed should be protected. However, after becoming a nursing student and realizing what exactly the process was and what exactly was being terminated, I felt different about it being human. I also personally have experienced poverty and the difficulties of getting out of it. Long story short, I'm pro-choice. Capital punishment. When I was younger, I thought the threat of death would scare more criminals into not committing crimes. One day I was fervently arguing online about the subject. When I started to do research using academic journals, as I usually do, I then got to reading about studies on the subject, interviews with prisoners, statistics about where it has been implemented versus where it hasn't, and, well, yeah, I'm not for it anymore. These are the reasons why, by memory, I'm not having this argument again. I used to think it'd be cheaper. It's not. Most people on death row will do everything in their power to throw every appeal they can at the courts, dragging the court case out for years and years. This ends up costing hundreds of thousands of dollars in salaries of court employees alone. Then the drug itself, well, it was only made by one company, who made it ridiculously expensive. In total, it cost easily over a couple $1 million to give somebody the death sentence, where they could be kept in prison for as little as 10-ish grand a year. I'm not going to bother to post references here. Do your own research if you want to. I used to think it would deter criminals. It doesn't. Why? Well, criminals don't think they'll ever get caught, so they're never afraid of the punishment, regardless of what it is. Criminals aren't the smartest people in the world most of the time, but that's why the smart ones are often very hard to catch. I used to think the death penalty was worse than life in prison. It really isn't. Imagine being forced to live in the worst place ever for the rest of your life, being served crap food, having to watch what you say or do for fear of being shanked if you step out of line. Now, imagine having to do this every day for the rest of your life. Very little access to anything to take your mind away from it all. Knowing that you will die in here. There is nothing else for you. This is it. This is your life for the next 40, 50 years. I think that'd be torture personally. The death penalty is almost an easy way out. I always say that's why most mass shooters shoot themselves in the end. Now, a lot of this research is psychology, which a lot of people will wave their hand at and say, oh, it's just a soft science. It's not worth anything, but it's the best thing we have to go off of. There really isn't any benefits to capital punishment other than satisfaction for the affected parties. I used to be a fairly vocal atheist, anti-theist really, very critical of all things religious. These days not so much. I'm still entirely secular, so from a theological point still atheist, but it's not really part of my identity anymore, and I've got much more respect for other people's faith. The online atheist community and its flirtations with far-right politics played a big part in pushing me away. Also just growing up a bit and not thinking I know better than everyone all the time. When I was a preteen and early teen boy, I said unkind things about men who prefer to be with men. It's no excuse, but yes, I was just regurgitating what other crapheads on the block heard from their older brothers and fathers. A few years later in high school I became friends with a dude I came to really think he was a good person. He was part of my friend group. All around nice guy. Gay as frick. 2. Flaming. Lisping. Into fashion. Madonna. The whole 9 yards. I realized that didn't give a crap. A personal and humanizing connection can often be stronger than ingrained prejudice. That community college was for the kids in high school who couldn't get into a real college. I changed my opinion once I realized my parents weren't helping me pay for college. So I turned down acceptance letters from 2 universities and enrolled in a CC where I'm fulfilling my genets for a fraction of the price. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.